Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to week 8 of Planning for Profit. This week's topic is food safety. We have two speakers today. Glenn Holloway is with Tourmaline Farms in Deary, Idaho, and he's going to be talking to us about the food safety, well, it's FSMA. I'm sorry, I can't remember the whole acronym today, but it's a current piece of legislation that relates to food safety, and then regulations related to on-farm poultry production and processing and raising meat on farm. Diane Green is going to talk about food safety and post-harvest handling and the requirements in organic systems for using manure and manure compost. Cinda and I are going to be your facilitators today. So again, webinar tips: if you could close all the programs that are running on your computer except for the webinar, it will optimize your viewing experience and the speed and sound. If you're having trouble with your sound, please mute your computer and then go ahead and call in on the phone. And if you can type your questions into the question box during speakers' presentations, we'll be able to jump right into the Q&A sessions. A quick review of assignments. Your readings are all links posted online this week, and the major reading is A Farmer's Guide to Food Safety and Conservation, which is on Wild Farm Alliance's website. It's a great resource, and you can go into depth on different issues that relate to your production system, and it goes over how to develop a farm map and look for sources of contamination on your farm. There's a lot of other food safety information, websites and resources in week 8, and you can look at those that pertain to your enterprise. And then the exercise is to use an online food safety planning tool to start developing your food safety plan. And then share what you've learned in the discussion forum. So here it is, Food Safety Modernization Act. So Glenn,
there you go. Now we know what FSMA stands for. And I will move forward into the today's presentation on the Food Safety Modernization Act. I thank you very much for inviting me to be a guest speaker today. This is a new regulation that is going to that had 2 years actually to gather comments from before they signed it into law. Let's see if I can get the next slide to come down, please. Okay, next slide.
Cinda, you have control of the mouse to switch.
This is like what we used to see on television, where excuse us while we're having technical difficulties.
That's right.
There we go. All right, Food Safety Modernization Act is on today's 18th of March, as you all know, in case it's gotten away from us. And like I said, this act took 2 years for comments. It came from the Food Safety Enhancement Act, which was a previous act, and they realized that probably wasn't good enough, and Congress decided that they would pass more laws and enact more safety for our behalf. Today's agenda is right here. I'm going to talk about why has this act been enacted? Why did we sign this, and why did the USDA give this over to the Food and Drug Administration? And then they've come up with a general approach for their implementation, and in that they've done some assessments and said, hey, maybe some of the people out there should be exempt from this. And today we won't be talking about the Trans Produce Act that also goes with it, which is an international act that kind of accompanies this and exempts some large corporations that are multi-country from the FSMA. But we'll talk about the exemptions that actually impact on you, the farmer, and small producers. And in doing this, we'll go down and look at some of the state processing rules and regulations. I'll use one particular enterprise today, which is mainly chickens and poultry, and talk about how that is a little different in each state, the state of Idaho and the state of Washington. And then we'll move on and talk about, if these things bother you and you think maybe you're being over-regulated or some of the regulations are something you have questions on, and I'm sure when we get into the next presentation and we get talking about the use of compost and those types of things, you'll have to say, really, is this something we really want to support, or should we be able to do something about that? And here's what you can do. We'll discuss that, and then we'll get down into the local community, which even the big guys now, USDA and Cornell University and Penn State and some others have said, listen, if we can't maintain food security and food sovereignty at the local community, we're not going to be able to do it at a larger area. You hear a lot about let's feed the world, and that all sounds good, but we've got to start by being able to maintain security and our food right here at the local community. So, is this really food safety modernization? Most of us as farmers realize that technology over the last few years has really made it a lot better with farming, and some of it's really been great technology, but are there some things that classically over a long time period that we really want to allow to be changed? I mean, do we really want to modernize things to the point where we have a cow like this can drive their own tractor and feed themselves as they go along, and then somebody come along and be able to tell you, hey, that cow's got to look and eat a certain amount every day to be healthy, or we're not going to certify it as ready to go to butchering? And I really don't think that's where we need to go. So you got to kind of figure out, why is it that we have gone to now passing this act? For years, we were reactionary at a government level, or even basically at a local level. You'd come up with some kind of a disease, maybe something would happen to a local food source, people would get sick, they'd report into the hospital, and all of a sudden, the county health and the doctors and nurses and people in the area and the health providers would realize we've got a problem and we've got to figure out where this came from. They'd react to it, track it down, and then try to rectify it. It was kind of a reactionary type method. You didn't implement any kind of controls or take any action until something actually happened. Well, over the years, they've decided this wasn't good enough. And so here are some of the stats. It's been pretty steady too since 1996. We've had over 3,000 deaths basically a year due to annual foodborne illnesses. And you get looking at the major perpetrators, and the largest one has been your industrial agriculture operations, your large industrial ag. Case in point, 2 years ago, as we look over here to the right, we had 45 outbreaks of salmonella linked to poultry. 2 years ago, one of the major poultry producers had 77 people hospitalized and 3 deaths. They had to recall, I think it was like 1 billion pounds of poultry meat, and then they had to track it down. Now, their old industry, the Poultry Magazine, talked about it and has been pretty open about it. They tracked it down to one of the production houses and one of the processing plants, and USDA got in there with the health department, and they tried to rectify it. And their procedures, although I'm sure trying to read it in, basically when it was said and done, they said, listen, no fines levied, and as long as the product coming out passes 40%, that is that 40% of the poultry coming out still showed positive signs for salmonella, we're going to authorize it again for you to put it back on the shelves, and it went back out on the shelves. So I'm not sure that we as consumers would say that was a good safety practice, but that's the question of the matter. It was large industry, and large industry didn't want to be out of production or losing profit due to some of their own practices. They did take steps to rectify the problem, and continued to be monitored by the USDA and the FDA. So we have problems there. Here in the restaurants and local area, you go places, you hear about food poisoning and other food things that have time temperature associated with them. This is where we mainly run into problems where we have, people getting sick, and you probably yourself have at some time in your life said, wow, I think I got a mild case of food poisoning from something you've eaten someplace. Now, part of the problem with this is the fact that a lot of what we have coming in for food for our nation is coming from outside and coming in, and we've traced some of it back to the sources, some of it coming from Mexico, some of it coming from other countries such as Turkey and those type of things. Another problem we've run into is in today's society, we are very much a fast food generation, and people run out a lot and they find themselves eating out a lot more, and hence they subject themselves to the possibility of coming down and getting sick with food that's not prepared properly. As a matter of fact, as a farmer myself, a lot of times when I'm selling poultry to people, I actually include a sheet that says, now here's how you cut it up, and here's how you prepare it. Because a lot of people have lost that skill just because it's not taught in school anymore, or like I said, we are a fast food generation. So the USDA decided to write and do the Food Safety Modernization Act. They then handed that off and said the person who's going to, or the agency that's going to run it will be the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. And so they're no longer focusing on being a reactionary type mode. They are now getting into prevention. If we can prevent illnesses and we can prevent people from getting sick, maybe that's, as a government, is what we should be doing. And so hence the Food Safety Modernization Act was proposed and is ultimately signed. It's been one of the most sweeping reforms in our safety laws for 70 years. And it covers all aspects of food from production to consumption. So we're looking at the growing process, the harvest process, and also what happens with the processing of the food that is grown. And in the pictures I've got here on this slide, there on the left stands your FDA inspector with his citation book, writing up a citation for a warehouse that was either not in compliance with rules that have been established. And it also has given you hold then on things that they decided not to let out to the public. They put it on hold, and then it waits destruction. So it was signed into law by President Obama on January 4th of 2011. As we talked about in the previous slide, it gives the FDA, or the Food and Drug Administration, the authority to regulate the way food's grown, harvested, and processed. Basically what it's telling you is that, like over on the right there in that food cycle picture, the FDA now is involved in every step of the food process. And so when you're planning for profits, and we're talking about food safety, now we're talking about the fact that the FDA has got a system it's enacting that affects all farmers, all manufacturers, and all importers when it comes to food. And it puts a whole lot of responsibility back on the farmer with new regulations as they look at your safety practices and the methodology you use on your farms when you are growing and producing food or your particular enterprise. And the bottom line there, this is a brand new organization. As such, it's going to need money to operate from, so we're going to have an annual fee of $500 to register you, which will help fund the Food and Drug Administration's activities, not only in the States, but they are also looking at opening 2,000 offices overseas, because this extends not only within our borders, but also impacts people that import food, or that produce food and is thus imported into the United States for consumption by the consumer.